Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And I smile in the beginning with, I always butcher this opening thing that I've been doing for 20 years. But anyhow, that's why I'm smiling. And I'm smiling at my guests is Eleanor Roosevelt and Valerie Baham-Wright. I think I know this year. This is my little daughter.
Yes.
And I'm just so glad to have you on the show because of your history and what you've been doing since you came into this world through your grandmother, Eleanor Roosevelt. The name dropping, is that okay?
That's okay.
And
she's my great-grandmother, though.
Great-grandmother.
Yes.
Great-grandmother. Okay. So, each Conversations with Dr. Don show consists of two major segments. In the first segment, the Who Are You segment, I talk with my guests a little about who they are personally so that we might get a bit of an appreciation of why they say what they say. In the second segment, we'll talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and related topics. So before we start, I just read a poet's poem, and never mind that. Now my guest and I will tell you a little about who and how we are personally. And I haven't done this for myself, my personal stuff, and I'll read this. It takes a few moments. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, of red, white, and black Roman Catholic parentage on December 26, 1928. Today, I am a-religious and accepting of all others. I'm a retired PhD clinical psychologist and present-day television broadcast journalist. I'm the 12th of 12 children, am married, and am the father of 5 daughters by a first marriage. Politically, I'm a progressive populist activist still learning how to live lovingly. A few of my heroes include Jesus, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, and any other fellow human who is currently living lovingly. That's who I am. Now let's see who you are. Shall we save you for last?
Whatever you want.
All right. If I were to ask your best friend, who is Valerie? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend. Valerie is?
Valerie is a very loving, kind-hearted, generous person whom you can depend on. And we're the best of friends for life.
Yeah, and I've heard that before from the time you were that big. Yeah. So, when and where were you born?
I was born in Los Angeles in 1953.
Yeah, and I ask you that because the viewers don't know that. That's why I wanted them to hear where. Why were you born?
I was born to help. I was born for several purposes, but I feel like most of all I was born to make a difference in people's lives. And I've done that along the way in many ways. So through personal relationships and through my work and a lot of other things that I've done everywhere I go. Who I am kind of guides how I touch people and make a difference everywhere I go.
You don't still work, do you?
I am retired, but I'll never stop working completely.
And you are a loving person. How about cultural, racial heritage, anything along those lines?
My parents are Creole, and so identify with Creole heritage, but not just limited to that, because I've lived in a lot of places. I have friends of various cultures, and so I feel very blessed to have experienced a lot of different people in my heart as well. So I like knowing who people are. So I sort of lend my mind and heart to communicating with them in a way that also makes them feel understood, which I feel is very important.
A religious preference nowadays, I'm not talking about many, many years ago when you were a Catholic kid.
I don't have a religious preference right now.
Are you
I
an
think I'm-
atheist or an atheist?
I'm not an atheist, but I'm open to learning more.
Yeah. Say a few words about your formal education.
I went to Immaculate Heart College with Juliana
Mm-hmm.
and got my bachelor's in social relations there. And then I went to Cal State, Dominguez and Long Beach, and got a master's in education and curriculum development.
Mm-hmm.
And went to 9 or 10 other colleges and universities.
You just
So
like to travel around, don't you?
I do. I like being in a classroom, apparently. And so I also have a CAS, which is an advanced master's in education and a doctorate in education.
And is that how you met Juliana?
I met Juliana in the dorm
Mm-hmm.
in undergrad when we were mere children.
Some years ago.
And you put up with her all these years. Yeah. And you've been living with us for a few days since the show
Yes, I
is going
have.
on now. Yeah. And it's been delightful. And
Thank
you've been
you.
delightful.
It's been a wonderful time for me, too.
And we'll get to you in a moment. So you have a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, or LGBTQ, anything else?
I'm single.
Single.
I am.
You hear that, guys? She's single. And you have 2 children.
I do.
Say a few words about them.
Ahmad and Sira are my son and daughter.
And they're
Ahmad.
delightful.
I think so too. Yes, Ahmad went to Cal and he's working now at Stanford. He's an assistant dean there, loves his work,
Mm-hmm.
and I learn from him all the time too. He does fascinating work. And my daughter went to UCLA and played volleyball there.
I remember.
That was very, very exciting. It was very exciting going to all of their games. My son was on the track team at Cal and captain of the track team for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been very wonderful seeing them grow up. And my daughter has a successful online business,
Mhm.
which is also very fascinating
Of course,
to see
we
her
can't
success.
pass through this without you mentioning your grandchildren.
Well, I do have 2 grandchildren, Sanaya and Ari.
Mm.
Sanaya is 3 years old, and Ari is 9 months old.
Which one is it that wrecks your back periodically?
I do, because I pick them up and carry them around and have fun with them all the time. But
I try to soothe you and say, lighten up. How about political persuasion? Do you have a political persuasion on the political continuum, left, right, center, or what? Or all over the place?
I am more center. I'm a registered Democrat, but nowadays what means more is what's in your heart and what you believe in, and relating to people based on who they are, their values and priorities.
We have a question for you, but we don't have much time. What's in your heart?
Love. Kindness.
Yeah. The difference between sympathy and empathy, is there a difference between those two?
I think it's not significant in that having either one is a gift. So sympathy is the ability to, I guess, feel sorry for someone. Empathy is the ability to understand their feelings in your heart, to share an emotion with them that creates a connection that I think is of great value.
There's your fellow PhD in psychology over there. Do you agree with what she just said?
Yes, I do.
What else can? Yeah. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. Yvonne, anything that's worth mentioning now?
I'm not active in any organization.
We're going to change that. Persons from the past that you particularly liked or admired. Any names come to mind besides Juliana?
I like to say that, and I do believe that there are a lot of people that influenced who I am and that have touched my life, and who I am is a combination of many people, hundreds, maybe even thousands of people. I've had a lot of students and co-workers, and I don't like to choose any one person or famous people or anything.
All right, so we better leave you and go over to Juliana.
Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
If I were to ask your best friend, who is Juliana? What would your best friend say?
They
your
would
best friend.
say, I will be my best friend. She would say that I'm a loyal friend and that I always try and be available for her. And she would also say that I am someone with a lot of ideas. She would say, Juliana is always trying to rope me into some idea to change the world. She has enormous enthusiasm and is not always the most practical person. I think that's what they would say.
Yeah. And is it fair to ask you when and where you were born?
Yes, of course. I was born in New York City in 1952.
Mm-hmm. Why were you born?
Oh, well, my parents wanted to have a baby, obviously. That was the, the first thing. But I think that, or I feel that because I have a strong purpose in this world, I've always, since I was a little girl, felt very strongly about social justice issues. I've always experienced empathy and compassion. And I've always done things that enabled me to try and find some way to touch other people and to be a part of a change for good.
Any person come to mind now that you particularly touched? That's a dumb question because there are probably thousands. Just experiencing.
I mean, how many people that I have touched?
Yes, in that way, that unique way.
Well, I think I'm very blessed because people often tell me that they were touched by something I did in my life. My clients, when I worked as a clinical psychologist, the young people who worked in the nonprofit that I started in South Central LA, different organizations I've worked with. I've campaigned for politicians I felt very strongly about getting elected. And I would say that many times in my life people have thanked me. I've been very fortunate to be able to hear that from people.
Yeah. And I think they can look right in your eyes and see that you're honest.
Maybe that's it.
How about your national or cultural heritage? Anything unique about it other than being the great-granddaughter of Eleanor Roosevelt?
I think probably the legacy of my family is the most important part because I'm a descendant of, Teddy Roosevelt is my great-great-uncle, and Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt are my great-grandparents. So my family came from Holland, on my father's side. in the late 1600s. And on my mother's side, her parents and grandparents immigrated from Sweden and from France. So, and I haven't really done the DNA test, so I'm sure there must be more, but.
Yeah. Religious preference, did you have one before and do you have one now?
Yes, I was brought up as an Episcopalian, and I still identify as Episcopalian whenever you're asked to write it down on a medical form or something. But in practice, I'd say I was a pragmatic Buddhist.
Pragmatic Buddhist. Interesting. I've never had a pragmatic Buddhist as a guest on my show. What is a pragmatic Buddhist?
Well, in the realm of Buddhism, there are many different schools, and a particular teacher that I follow, Thich Nhat Hanh, who was recognized with a Nobel Peace Prize, and came from Vietnam, and it's taking the tenets of Buddhism, the 2,500 years of that work, beginning with the Buddha, and using that in practical ways. How do you work to bring loving kindness to more people in the world? How do you work to, through yourself and even the smallest of actions, that ripple out to create a world that eventually will be full of peace?
Yeah. I'm marveling at myself as I'm listening to you and also experiencing you as I see you saying what you're saying and torn between just experiencing and thinking about, never mind, stop me. And your formal education.
Well, I met Valerie at Immaculate Heart College, which was a wonderful experience and was not the college of my choice and turned out to be an exceptional place for me. And then I rushed off to graduate school at Boston University and got to work as quickly as possible. And I have been at any number of other schools pursuing other interests. I've been studying for the last 4 years at UCLA at the Semmel Institute, studying mindfulness meditation. And prior to that, I also worked, and I still do work, as a landscape designer and consultant with architects and other landscape architects. So I also studied that as well. And when I was working as a psychologist, I also studied, I was particularly interested in the issue of child maltreatment. So I took various classes in the issue of dealing with trauma in children.
Did you miss any other focuses? You covered so much, yeah. And through it all, it's your way of being with people and caring and sharing your reality. And I think you touch a lot of people, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're still working at all?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I plan to work as long as possible.
Yeah. And you have a partner?
Yes, I do. I was single for some time, and I fell in love with a wonderful man who was a journalist for 30 years and now teaches in the law school at University of California at Irvine. Mm-hmm. And I feel very blessed to have found a companion for this part of my life.
I'm in love with a wonderful guy.
Yes, exactly.
I'm studying singing. Sounds like it, yeah.
Yes, I'm very, very happy about that.
And you have a son.
Yes, I do. I have one son who's 33, Nicholas, and he and his wife have a wonderful child, my grandson, Elliot, who's going to be 2 in several weeks.
Does he like you?
Ah, yes.
No, how can he help it?
Yes, we have a mutual adoration society.
Oh, yes, yes. That's enough, one song for tonight.
Yes.
And political, do you have a daughter?
No, I don't.
No,
I
I
have
forgot
some 2 stepdaughters, who are in and out of my life, and I'm very fond of them, Michelle and Pilar.
Yeah, all right. So, your political persuasion, generally speaking, you're left, right, or center?
Oh, I'd say I was definitely left, and I've been a registered Democrat since I can remember. But I would say I'm not an ideologue. I am a thinking citizen, and I'm always interested in what's going on politically. I've always been politically interested and politically active.
Did you vote for Trump?
Absolutely not. That would
Trying
never
to
have.
throw you off there.
That would never have. I mean, that's just not a kind of the quality of person I would vote for.
Yeah.
Ever.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, any of those come to mind? You probably have 1,000 that you belong to.
I've been involved in a lot of organizations, generally focused on what I used to think of as sort of the people in society that are most vulnerable, organizations dealing with children and what is now euphemistically called food insecurity, meaning hungry children.
Food insecurity.
Yes, that's what it's called now in the United States, and what it means is that children are hungry in our country, 3 out of 5.
Do we have children hungry in our country?
Oh, yes, we do, Don. Yes, we do. And then my other focus has always been the elderly, housing for the elderly, different kinds of things, because these are sort of our vulnerable areas. And I've been involved in Planned Parenthood for many, many years. And I serve on the board of directors for the Eleanor Roosevelt Center.
The Eleanor Roosevelt Center, yeah.
And then I'm also a commissioner in the city of Long Beach. I serve on the Cultural Heritage Commission, where we do our best to preserve the heritage of our architecture and cultural being through the buildings and the wayfare of our city. And and my other organizations are my book club.
I was waiting for you to run out of steam, but I think I'd better stop you because we got a limited amount of time.
Okay. But my book club is highly significant to me. I've actually had many, depending on where I was living, but I have one that I've been involved with now for more than 20 years, and that's a wonderful thing.
So what do you do with the book club?
Well, we read books, and then we get together and discuss them. And
how often do you meet?
Once a month.
Oh. I bet you got some stories about your members.
Stories about the members, but I think it's reading the books that's the most interesting, because oftentimes you'll read a book that you didn't have any interest in reading and find out after the discussion what an extraordinary author that was, or what special thing that book brought that maybe you didn't see. And plus which, then I have a group I can get to read Moby Dick with me about every 5 years. It's one of my favorite books.
Do you ever sleep?
Yes, 8 hours. I'm an 8-hour person.
I can't believe that. Do you believe she's telling the truth?
I'm a very fast reader.
I'm a slow reader, yeah. As I told you the other night, The Elephant Whisperer, I'm reading it for the 3rd time, and I'm so slow. Even though I've read it twice before, I dwell on it because there's so much going on. The Elephant Whisperer, read that.
That is a beautiful book. That I would agree. That is a beautiful
Persons
book.
from the past are alive today that you look up to or really admire. Any names come to mind besides Eleanor and Franklin?
Well, there are many people, but it also strikes me that today is Veterans Day, and I feel, I can't imagine where we would be without the heroism of the people who for centuries have fought for social justice and right, and the many men and women in this country who've done that. They're all heroes, but I also think they're heroes all the time, every day, that we don't even know necessarily, you know?
Yes.
I think it's a state of mind. I mean, I have a friend, Mario Chiodo, a very well-known sculptor, who created a sculpture in Oakland called Champions for Humanity. And he chose, he said it was very difficult, but he chose a number of heroes. Thich Nhat Hanh was one, Mother Teresa, Schindler, Martin Luther King. I mean, it goes on and on. There are just, we've been blessed. There's so many people. Gandhi, I mean, there's, who you mentioned before. There's so many inspiring people.
Are you still meditating?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. When you mentioned Gandhi and the people you mentioned so far, and do you have some sort of a magic formula you can lay on me so I can get back to meditating again? I miss it so much.
The only thing I can tell you is it's a practice. And it's like going, anything else you do, you have to do it. You have to exercise it. You have to do it.
Are you still meditating?
I am, not as often as I would like, but with Juliana's help, I'm doing it more and more. So.
Yeah, right. So it looks like we better leave this part of our show and get ready for the topic at hand, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So let's take a break and talk about my thoughts for the day. Can we do that? Sees me and has a comment. It's very tricky because the idea is to have somebody talking to me face to face other than through a screen, you know. But I can go in for the half an hour on that one too.
I bet.
So, all right, let's go back. We're back, and thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And my guests tonight are Valerie Baham-Wright and Juliana Roosevelt. God, I get so involved in what's going on, I forget who my guests are. All right, so I have some cheat notes here. And the questions that we are going to be addressing came from Valerie and from Juliana. And Universal Declaration of Human Rights, UDHR. What is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? What types of human rights are included in it? What is it?
Is that one question? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is a formal document that was created and in 1948, and it was accepted by the United Nations. There were 57 member states, all of them accepted except for 7 who abstained. So in essence, the world, the member states of the world at that time, accepted the document as part of what they would aspire to and work towards.
And no exceptions?
There were no negative votes, but there were 7 exceptions, yes.
Oh.
Yeah, there were 7 exceptions. But they did not negate it. So this declaration really stems from the history of, let's say, the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence. And the idea was that even then in 1948, 70 years ago, the world is not that big a place, and everyone should have this sense of connectedness and empowerment of knowing that they are contained as human beings with innate rights, innate dignity. And there are 30 articles. And
what about Magna Carta? Say a couple words about that. There are a lot of people who don't know what that is about because they are so old. I
well,
know
it's
about that
something.
being old.
It's something you learn about in history class, and
Okay,
it
so
was,
please
you
go
know,
on.
no, it's a. But let me finish. Let me go on to the
course.
UDHR, which is really my focus right now. And Valerie and I have been working on this project for a while through the Eleanor Roosevelt Center. So there are 30 articles in the Declaration that cover everything from, you know, different legal questions, like the fact that you are entitled to a fair trial, to the fact of various basic human freedoms. Everyone is entitled to a nationality. Everyone should be safe and free from torture or bodily harm. Slavery is not something that the world accepts. People have a right to marry whom they choose. People have a right to flee their country if they fear for their lives. And yes, it is a human right to apply for amnesty in another country. It is a human right to be able to work in a job that uses your abilities, and to do so in a way that is compensated, that provides you a basic living where you can enjoy the social, cultural, and scientific benefits of society. And that children and mothers deserve recognition, as do elderly people, the vulnerable in our society. And that people should be able to live without fear. You know, whether that's a bomb dropping through your ceiling into your living room, as is happening in some places of the world, or being bullied at school, or being shot when you're at your supermarket. I mean, these are human rights, and they basically cover all aspects of living.
Do you think the present administration is concerned about human rights? Speaking.
I'm sure that they would say they would, but no, I think there's been huge, not just abrogation of human rights, but I mean, actual condemnation of different groups of people by the president himself, actually. I mean, we live in a country now where people call certain ethnic groups, you know, rapists, murderers, and drug addicts. Mm-hmm. There's no sense of humanity, or no sense of empathy, which is, you know, walking in another person's shoes, really.
I'm glad you're so apolitical.
I'm sorry, I didn't get that, Gene.
That's one you missed. Very good, very good. You have some questions for Juliana, and we have some here. You want to go from these or from the top of your head?
From the top of my head, just to follow up with what you were talking about, is the UDHR political? Does it support one political party more than others, or what one type of form of government versus another?
No, the UDHR is apolitical and nonpartisan. And human rights are not a political issue. Human rights have to do with everyone and the way in which we live. And a human right is intrinsic to just being born as a human being. It is not a gift. It is not something that is given to you by another power. It is something that you carry with you always. And various countries, even countries that we see as violating human rights, including the United States, we all purport at some point and somewhere in our literature to support human rights. I think in the United States sometimes the United Nations is used as a political football, but the United Nations is there to stand above and beyond politics and beyond the partisanship that we engage in as human beings. It's a bigger picture, global concept.
Well, there are some people in the world who think that the United Nations is a political football more than what it's about human rights and those kinds of things. Is it obsolete, the United Nations?
Oh, I don't think so at all. I think more than ever we need a place where we can go to engage in dialogue. And there are very few places that are neutral or that are safe. And that just doesn't happen, basically, anymore. There's so much polarization throughout the world, not just in the United States.
It seems almost hopeless, but hope springs eternal, or something like that. And yeah. So you want to read from the questions here, or you got another one?
How can the UDHR make a difference? I mean, it's a document that
right.
people
It's a piece of paper, you know, or a small booklet or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I think there's something really interesting about the fact that 9 people were asked to chair a committee to create this document. 8 men, 1 woman, and they came from 6 different continents. They spoke different languages. They came from very different cultural and religious backgrounds. And somehow they managed to create this, they managed to find the commonality of what was essential for defining what they would want to be considered a respectful and dignified way to live in the world. And I think that when people see that and they know that it applies to them, it's not just for someone else, it applies to them, and it connects them with every other person. You know, let's say if you're a child and you learn about human rights, it connects you with every other 5-year-old in the world. It's very empowering to feel connected, you know. And there's a research, other countries do teach the UDHR. In fact, in almost any country that you go to in the world, there are some exceptions. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is on the wall, as is the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of a Child. And those are on the wall, and children learn about them, and they can be living in the most, you know, violent, you know, town outside of, let's say, San Salvador, or in a beautiful, you know, suburb of Paris, or someplace in sub-Saharan Africa, or, you know, wherever this is. They know that those are their rights. They draw pictures about them. They talk about it. They're, you know, it's not just aspirational. And like anything else, it's something you have to make happen for you. I mean, in this country, we have to work really hard at our form of government, right? It doesn't just, you know, happen. People have to be involved. The same kind of thing is true here. And I really feel that particularly now, the more people are aware of this document, they're aware that it even exists, they're aware that there are these rights already there for them. You know, they're free. You don't have to buy this. It's, you know, it's there.
So other countries pay attention to the human rights than America is?
Yes, many more countries do.
Why do you suppose that is?
I think because rights are a place where people can, I mean, the word rights almost sounds like something, when I say that to someone sometimes in this country, they'll say, okay, well, if someone else has a right, what am I losing? What do I have to give up so that someone else has a right? Because they don't understand that it's also their right as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know? In Scandinavian countries, in Canada, in certain educational curriculums in countries in South America and also in Africa, the African continent, and Australia. Human rights are part of the curriculum.
Yeah, so I wonder, what is it that interferes with the recognition of human rights and people living lovingly, so to speak?
Mm-hmm.
What interferes with that? I've got my axe I'm going to grind here.
Okay.
About I need in this country wealth control.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
Well, I think we do need some way to, I mean, the playing field has to be leveled. You cannot have a situation where people are condemned to poverty for their entire life.
Yeah.
I mean, taxes are there for the benefit of all. The happiest people in the world live in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and they pay an enormous amount of taxes, but the taxes also give people excellent education, free higher education. You know, they're provided with excellent vacation times. They have healthy food to eat. The air they breathe is clean. Seniors are taken care of.
Okay.
And yes, I know that sounds somewhat like socialism, but these...
You got my question. I couldn't get it out.
I'm sorry, but it does. But you know, there are many, many different ways. I mean, and if we look back in our history, income tax was created for that very reason. There was a smaller and smaller pool of, you know, millionaires and a large pool of uneducated, hungry, impoverished people. And taxes, the income taxes, basically stop that. I mean, that's why we have fire departments. That's why we have streets that aren't full of, you know, aren't dirt roads.
What about Franklin Roosevelt? Was he instrumental in income tax and those kinds of
Yes, he was.
social, yeah.
Yes, he was. And is probably best known for the creation of Social Security, which no one of either party in this country wants to give up.
How come Donald Trump hasn't attacked FDR?
Has a what?
He hasn't attacked FDR. That's
Well,
one that
maybe
Donald Trump
because
has
we would all rise up and go knock on his door. I don't know. I don't know, but I should also, I mean, my family is political, and we, like any family, we represent the spectrum here. Not me particularly, but I mean, you know, there are people in my family who are certainly on the other side of the spectrum from me.
I can't believe that. Not with that name. So, how about from some of these? Any more questions from you?
How do you propose we move in the direction that you're suggesting in terms of making people more aware of their human rights, and what do you hope to accomplish?
There's several different ways that the Eleanor Roosevelt is working on, and I am representing them. And you have also worked with me on this, so you know that in just a few weeks, December 10th, is going to be the 70th anniversary of the signing of this UDHR, the Universal Declaration.
70th anniversary.
70th anniversary. So we are asking all mayors in the United States, all governors in the United States, congresspeople and senators to declare that a week of human rights awareness, and to read a proclamation stating just that, and including the preamble of the Declaration, which talks about the inherent dignity and rights of everyone. So that's a beginning, and mayors have been excited about it.
And you started that yesterday in Portland, Oregon here.
No, we started that a couple of years ago.
I'm talking about
But yes,
locally here. Yeah.
But locally here,
'Cause you
Valerie
are
and
talking
I did meet with the mayor of Portland, who was very, you know, we talked a lot about the problems that are happening right now in Portland, and the difficulties that are, you know, the polarization of the city and the violence that ensues. And he was more than happy to do this. He's very excited about it. He hopes that this, you know, can be used in some way to create a dialogue or create some way to, you know, change that. So, and there already is in the city of Portland a Human Rights Commission, which is not true all over the rest of the country. So we're also asking cities to begin and create a commission on human rights. And this is also working through different churches that want to incorporate this, different schools that want to incorporate this. So basically within this year, we're trying to create an awareness, and there will be then probably in January a large press conference about how many mayors, how many governors, the senators who got together, and the Congress people to read this into the congressional record, so that people can see it on CNN, those who watch CNN. And then we'll move into more programming, because for the 75th anniversary, our goal is really global, and that will be to bring about not only awareness, but to create a network, a connectedness between civic leaders, individuals, all different kinds of groups, to bring pressure upon their government to either reaffirm their commitment to the UDHR or affirm, you know, create a commitment to the UDHR. So that in 2023, this again will come to the United Nations, and there will be a collective acknowledgement of the fact that we are all human beings and these are our rights. And in the ensuing years, there will be conferences and any number of other things.
Do you think it'll change the world's direction?
I hope so.
Of course you
I
do,
think
yeah.
there's a possibility. I mean, I think that it's like anything else. Knowledge is power. And we have extraordinary technology, and why not make use of that technology, and why not create a way for people to connect through ideas that matter to them?
It's a wonderful idea, wonderful what you're about. You've been doing it for so long. Yeah, I think you'll keep going in this same direction and be successful, and I'm going to be watching
Thank you.
in the background and cheering you on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any more? You have these questions here. Is human rights related education beneficial for people who don't feel that they have human rights issues that are related directly to them? Yeah, I think we were talking about that so far. And people in third world countries are concerned about human rights, and more so than the average American?
Well, I think they've been exposed to it, first of all. And maybe they've been, I think people in the United States too have, until, I mean, in this country we've sort of looked at human rights as civil rights. And that was what people used to consider a portion of our history. And then we sort of compartmentalized that. And then we had women's rights, we compartmentalized that. And then we have gay rights, we compartmentalized that. And in between there, we also had the rights of the disabled. And, you know, we tend to move from one right to the other, and never really quite finishing, and never really quite having a really serious dialogue and bringing up all of the things that are inherent in the fact that why you even need to discuss, you know, rights. You have to also discuss the horrors of the injustice that has created this need, right? So human rights takes all of that. I mean, that was something that Eleanor Roosevelt felt really strongly about, that yes, she was in favor of women's rights, but what we need to do is talk about human rights. We need the collective, all of us, no matter who we are.
What about the relationship between the American Constitution and human rights?
The American Constitution leaves lots of room for human rights. It really does. It's an extraordinary document in its own. I mean, there have been obviously amendments to the Constitution that have brought to the foreground aspects of human rights that we have needed to legitimize. And it is possible, you know, at some point that the Declaration could as some whole be accepted into a constitution, or accepted, you know, different countries, South Africa for one, has used the Declaration as a blueprint for setting up their new government. So I mean, it's been used in many governments. You know, new formations of democracies and governments, when they're making changes, they go and look at the UDHR for, you know, help in figuring out how they're going to deal with certain issues.
In your work, you ever talk to anybody who seemed to be negative in considering human rights and
Well, the interesting thing is that people on both, in this country, people on both sides of the aisle are very much in favor of this once you talk to them about it. And they're almost sort of shockingly in favor. Because I think often people with some sense of power or some sense of security, whether it's economic or related to their position in society, they don't think much about this because they just assume their rights are protected.
I think that probably some people, if you talk to them just at random in the supermarket, for example, about human rights, they would not be too sure what you're talking about.
Oh, that's very true too.
And why is that?
Because we don't ever talk. I mean, we don't talk about this document. It's not part of our educational system. It's not part of our public forum.
Perhaps if we have a way we can have it on our cell phones, we can probably have our youngsters learn about human rights more directly, huh?
I think we can. I think there's wonderful ways for access. The other, you know, the Eleanor Roosevelt Center also has educational programs. We work with universities. We're helping to connect universities with early childhood education. The idea being that, let's say, PhD candidates or graduate students will want to adopt the work of the UDHR and create different kinds of curriculum or experiential events for young children. Because young children are the perfect vehicle. And in my generation, we learned about wearing a seatbelt. We don't give it a second thought. In my son's generation, he learned to put on a bike helmet, right, before he did any kind of sport with wheels or snow or water or anything like that. But they don't give it a second thought. In my grandson's Montessori preschool, they talk about human rights. So for him, it will be a normal part of what he considers his world. That's my hope. And I think it's possible. I mean, I wouldn't have spent all this time doing it if I didn't think there was a possibility. I think we have a huge opportunity here.
Well, that's just interesting and wonderful, the work you're doing, and we need more people like you doing this kind of work. And your learning and your education and how you go about it and your personal presentation, and it speaks for it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I'm fortunate also to have friends like Valerie, so that I have a wonderful group of not just supporting this project, but also actively working and engaged in this project. There are people all over the United States, and there are also people all over the world now, friends that I have developed who are working on this project.
all together now, kumbaya. Okay, it looks like it's time for us to stop visiting and get ready to say goodnight. Keep those pens and pencils handy, because you may want to jot down something that we will show you in the closing credits. Thanks for watching. I invite you to give us feedback, both positive and negative, about any aspect of the show, and I mean it. It helps us to give you a better show in the future. I have a few public service announcements that I want to tell you about. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, everything would be down the tubes in this country right now. I've been a member for aeons, it seems, and I recommend looking up the ACLU, the phone number, and there's a website to learn more about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. And I think the Trumpsters may not like this PSA, but I think it's important. Now, the next one I want to tell you about is the Alliance for Democracy. Go to the national website at the alliancefordemocracy.org and the Portland, Oregon website at www.afd-pdx.org. The Alliance for Democracy, that's a great organization working on a national level about promoting democracy and what's important about that, okay? And now I have one more, ending corporate personhood. My God, you know what corporate personhood is about. Without corporations, we'd have more freedom and more what's important to be a productive citizen. Since the Supreme Court in March 2009 announced their decision that corporations are to be recognized as persons with the same constitutional rights as real human persons, tens of thousands of outraged citizens throughout the country have realized the need to amend the U.S. Constitution so that it clearly specifies that personhood rights shall be granted to only real flesh and blood persons and not to corporations, and that money is not speech. They have signed various move to amend petitions, circulated in their areas to express their sentiments to their government representatives. Please join the movement now to take back our country from the grasp of the corporatocracy and save this beautiful experiment in democracy called the United States of America. And it's time to say goodnight. Before we say goodnight, I also want to thank you for watching. And, remember KFC? Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too, and you too, and you too. And you can say something to the camera as a closing comment.
Thank you, and I hope that all of you will go to the website udhr@ervalkill.org and find more out.
Thanks again for watching, and good night.